Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Mettle Live. Today we're welcoming Charles Yeager, who's the author of hundreds of tutorials on video production for companies that include Mettle, Adobe, Tuts Plus, Premium Beats, and Shutterstock. He's a video producer editor in flat as well as 360 VR and AR media. And he's also the owner of Ozark Drones. Welcome, Charles. How are you today?
Good to be here. Yeah, doing well.
So let's start off. How did you get started doing tutorials?
Well, the tutorials, I was working at an ad agency, kind of my first video job out of college. And, a lot of times at the ad agency, depending on how much work we had, I would watch a lot of tutorials there kind of in my downtime to learn. And, eventually I think probably for a lot of people that make tutorials, you see something or you get to a point that you're like, well, I could probably do something like this myself. Or maybe you want to create a tutorial that you would want to watch or maybe prefer. And yeah, I reached out back in the day to Tuts Plus. That was the first company I did tutorials for, and they were kind enough to let me make a few and kind of went from there.
Well, you've done quite a few tutorials for us, and we get a lot of
Yep.
positive feedback. People find them easy to follow. You have a good pace. Like, how did you figure out the style of the tutorials that you wanted to do?
Yeah, that was really my motivation. It was I wanted to make some cut and dry tutorials that are just kind of really to the point and teach them in a style that like I would want to see and not really like kind of, I guess, not trying to overcomplicate them, really simplifying them, and that really also showing everything from the beginning throughout the process, but not so repetitive and like so beginner level that maybe somebody who's more experienced would get bored with it. But it's really, because that was one thing for me, especially in the beginning when I'm learning After Effects and stuff like that, is if things were skimmed over too quickly or not, or if the author assumed you knew too much, sometimes that can lead to a lot of confusion. So that was kind of what I went into creating tutorials with. That style was just really just to the point and, not necessarily trying to sugarcoat it. I mean, or I guess kind of be a presence on screen necessarily, but more just about the information and getting it conveyed to the viewer.
So you're saying your first job, you were working in video production for an ad agency, and you spent. Oh, that's really where you learned After Effects. You must have used it in a lot of your productions.
Yeah. So yeah, it's actually crazy to think about, but when I was a senior in high school or senior in college, I should say, that's really when I first even started dabbling in After Effects, and it wasn't that serious. That's when I kind of learned about it. It was CS4 at the time. And so upon graduating college and getting my job at the ad agency, that's really when I deep dived into After Effects. And at that point in time, I was probably spending between working at the ad agency and then learning other plugins and stuff at home on my own. I was in After Effects, I would say anywhere from 5 to 6, 7 hours a day, every day. And so that was for those few years right there in a row, I was able to just get a lot of After Effects experience. But again, like I said, I didn't do any After Effects in college at all, really. So, that was just really jumping in on the deep end there and just staying after it for quite a long time. And that's, again, kind of what got me then on the path of tutorials, was getting that experience.
So we have a comment from Alexandre. He's saying, I think my first tutorial for 360 was Charles, and he's saying he's a huge fan. So shout out to Alexandre.
Thank you. Yeah.
So
Well, the Mettle tutorials are some of the first 360 ones that I can even recall. I mean, that's when I saw, even the funny story of how I even got kind of connected with y'all was one of the 360 videos Chris had posted with Skybox, and at that point in time, he was showing how it was used with other plugins and other things like that, and that kind of really blew my mind that was being done in After Effects, and I wanted to kind of see what that was all about, and we got to talking on that video, and that's how we kind of got connected there. So
yeah, and you also entered our 360 countdown challenge back in the
yep,
day.
I remember that too.
And
Yeah.
that was a well done production. So you yourself have to go to resources to learn what you're doing. So let's just take a look at what are some of your favorite sources
Well,
for learning.
now, anymore, it's pretty much all on YouTube, like YouTube channels specifically. I mean, I do go to some websites as well, but a lot of times on the websites, they pretty much have videos that then link back to YouTube. But yeah, there's several creators, and there's more, and there's probably more I'm even leaving off of the list that I created. But a lot of the ones, definitely where I kind of got my start would be Video Copilot. That they've got, that huge list of tutorials, and a lot of those in the beginning are kind of like plug-in free. So like somebody who's brand new, doesn't have a lot of third-party plugins, can kind of learn the basics. They had a basic training thing. That was one of the first things that I did. So they're always a good resource. And then, A Scripts, if you
Whoops, we're losing you a bit, Charles. Can you just, I think we're stretching the bandwidth here. Can you just repeat that, please?
I got a ping there on my thing. I hope it's connected. Can y'all hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you.
We got a storm going out here, so hopefully that doesn't mess up too much, but I think we're good for the time being.
Okay, so let's jump back to that. So you started, you actually went to college on a cross-country scholarship, and you weren't studying film producing. You were studying, you're studying business.
Business, yes, and there's a couple reasons for that. First reason is, I was definitely always split. I do love business, and I love video production, both of those equally, I guess I would say. But at the college I was at, the only video stuff they really had, or kind of area you could pursue, was for broadcasting. It's kind of a big time like broadcasting town. It was in Springfield, Missouri, so there's lots of kind of local regional TV stations there. So it's kind of a transitional place for people that are getting into broadcasting. I was never really interested in broadcasting, but I was able to take other video classes and get access to a lot of video equipment that, in high school, because I'm from a really small town, I didn't have access to. So that was kind of neat to get to use that. And I became really good friends with the professors up there, and they let me use the equipment even when I didn't have like classes with them that semester and stuff. And being on the sports team, I was kind of the video guy of our team. So like, all the guys are getting together and we're making videos and stuff like that. So that was a lot of fun. But yeah, and it's always been a passion of mine, and with video, and after I graduated, I was like, I really, if I can, and an ad agency is kind of a mixture of both business and video, because, you're marketing something. So that kind of was a nice starting place for me.
So let's give a shout out to Jonathan Winbush. He's joined us. Good morning. How's it going, Jonathan?
How's it going, Jonathan?
So you studied business in college. You even stayed one more year, I believe, to do an MBA. And then you ended up in advertising. But then you were drawn back to your roots. And you're in a small town in Arkansas right now. And I always wanted to do some freelance work and kind of see if I could do it on my own. And that's kind of really what happened, because I was living in Little Rock at the time. I was working for the ad agency, and it's kind of two different worlds from where I kind of grew up. And I wanted to do a little bit more, maybe like outside, or just kind of change up the pace, because I really did like the work I was doing down there. But I did, at that point in time, I was getting into tutorials more and working with other companies a little bit more, and I kind of saw some opportunity there that would be some work that could come up. And then around the same time, drones were kind of just coming into popularity, and kind of combining that with the ad agency, we would do a lot of filming down there, and it was pretty obvious, like we would have to bring like a truckload of equipment to do a simple jib shot or a dolly shot. And once drones started becoming popular, it was pretty clear that you have this little tiny piece of equipment that can film in 4K, and it can replace a whole truckload of equipment. And at that point in time, the regulations and stuff were still really murky. And I knew that the company I was working for wouldn't really have the time to kind of explore that for a while. And so all these kind of things combined together, I was like, well, I'm going to strike out and go freelance and kind of network with them. And I knew I would still be doing a lot of work for them remotely. And so I kind of merged all three of those things together to, do what I'm doing now, which is, a lot of tutorial work, and then kind of independent freelance video production, and then drone work as well, which the drone stuff I like because it's a really good change of pace to go outside and just do something completely different from After Effects. But so yeah, it gives it a little more variety. But I think it's great because it shows that your passion, which really started in middle school of doing video production, you go to a bigger town, you go away to college, but then you go back to the country, and you can do your job from there because you have a lot of skills. So you started Ozark Drones, and you're kind of the go-to guy in your region.
Yeah, it's probably one of the most known in Arkansas for sure. I mean, Arkansas is not necessarily a massive hub, for any video production work, but I mean, a lot of stuff does get done here. A lot of TV shows will come through, if they're filming something, about the Ozarks, and sometimes I get the call to kind of help out with that. So that's nice. And yeah, I was trying to think. I had another point there, and it's slipped my mind.
So you've had like some international companies approach you for work, like you've done work for the BBC. For which other companies?
I've done work for the BBC, a show they did, kind of covering a person that lives remotely out here, kind of some of the living off the grid type stuff and stuff like that. So that was one for the BBC, which was fun. And then for the History Channel, I filmed a few things. And then I have other shows. They'll reach out to me if they need footage, because that's one thing, because a lot of times I can go out here and I can film a lot of footage and all the different weather elements, because I live here. And they might reach out to me and say, oh, we need a shot of the Ozark Mountains with this type of weather, and I probably got that shot, so I can kind of license in footage that way and stuff like that.
Well, let's jump to a clip from your company, and we'll take a look at that now. So that's pretty awesome. So we have a question from Alexandre. He's saying, you mean Ozarks, like the Netflix series? He says it's very exotic here in Paris, France. And I have to say, for me, like I've watched some of that series with Justin Bateman, and it looks very dark and kind of creepy. And how do people feel about that where you're from?
Yeah. I think people in the Ozarks just are happy to see that Ozarks gets any recognition at all. I mean, I really like that show, so I mean, that's the thing. I'm at least happy it's a good show. You know, it'd be something different if it was dark and it was like not a very good show. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely that vibe, and we kind of lean into that, you know, here somewhat to some degree. You know, you just kind of have to embrace that. That's the way some people think about it. Obviously, you saw in the video there. The very opening shot of that on that golf course is actually on the lake that show's supposedly supposed to be on. So, you know, you can see what a visual difference there is there with that. But, yeah, no, I mean, I'm a big fan of the show. But, yeah, I could definitely see how people could think that.
Well, I've been thinking once we're able to travel again, one of the things we'd like to do is take a road trip all the way down through the U.S. and definitely through the Ozarks, because there's supposed to be a lot of great music, great food, and it looks beautiful. I mean that's so it's that's why, I mean, that's kind of the cool thing about me going. I can just, if I want to get away from technology, I can just go out there, and I kind of have that right in my back door. So it's a lot of fun. So Alexandre is saying, beware of the Snell family, man, especially the mother.
Definitely.
So, in some ways, with a restriction in physical distancing, you're knowing a lot of things. You shoot, you edit, you do motion design. You're pretty well situated because you're used to working at home anyways, and you can go out and enjoy the beauty of the Ozarks now. So, how has things changed for you recently?
The changes have been fairly minimal. I mean, obviously it's been a change because I'm seeing a lot of people that I interact with or contact, they've had to make changes. So there has been impacts in that regard. As far as my day-to-day work, not a lot, but again, I'm in such a small town. I mean, 500 people live in this town. So, I mean, there's apartment complexes in cities that have more people than that. So, I mean, that's the big difference. And I think another stat that I saw is if you took the county I live in and how many people per square mile, it would be 10 people per square mile. So a square mile is a pretty large area.
Yes.
And have 10 people in it. So, but yeah, I mean, the one benefit for doing a lot of, working remotely and already kind of having that in place is, when stuff like this happens, I'm already working remotely. I'm already working from home. So that wasn't really a change for me, which, is a good thing because, you're kind of already working in that rhythm. You're kind of used to that already. So that's been, kind of one of the benefits, I guess I should say, for having to do freelance work and working a lot online already.
And you bring in a lot of your drone footage into tutorials as well as productions.
Yeah, yeah. I really like doing that quite a bit. So
we're going to jump to show a clip from a flux tutorial where you 3D track flux.
Hey guys, this is Charles Yeager with Mettle. In this After Effects tutorial, I'm going to show you how you can use Mettle Flux to add atmosphere to a scene. Let's go ahead and take a look at a few examples.
So in the tutorial, in the intro, you're showing a town. It kind of has like a True Detective kind of vibe.
Yeah.
Because
one of those shots I really like was that it's got kind of the blue fog, kind of looking down at kind of the alleyway there. It reminds me almost like a Blade Runner 2049 type vibe to it. But yeah.
We're going to jump now to another sample where. Again, your footage you're capturing in 360. It's one of your, oops, hang on a second. So we're seeing the breakdown of that shot where there's a triangle in an area.
Okay, was that playing?
Yeah, can you explain to us what we're seeing there?
Yeah, so this is kind of one of the things that with 360 video, there's so many different ways people can use it. And this is one of the ways that I find that I use it probably the most frequently is with compositing. And so what I like using 360 cameras for a lot is if I'm wanting to composite like a CG element that's tracked into a scene, sometimes it can be difficult, to make it look a little more realistic. But like in this case, what I did was I just took the Insta360 camera and I just took photos kind of at a location, and then I filmed that same area because I knew that's where I was going to be filming. And because I've got that 360 photo, I can use that as an environment map to get all the reflections, basically exactly the way they would be at the location. And it renders really quickly because it's already, it's an image, so it's not having to calculate all that. And I just created a quick example scene where I used a little drone to film this terrain, composite in kind of that, CG triangle element there with kind of like a liquid orb inside. And then I used the image from the Insta360 as a reflection map for everything because it kind of has a chrome surface, and that works really quickly, so you're getting those realistic reflections. And then actually on that liquid orb inside, I used the same reflection map, but I added flux, and I did it an equirectangular from the middle of it to kind of give it like a little bit like there's kind of like a little bit of fog or some other color texture inside that liquid, and I just kind of animated that with like the VR sphere effect offsetting it. So it just adds a little extra element to it that you can kind of see it almost like it's inside of the sphere.
We have a question from Robert Hansen. He's asking, what tool do you use to remove the drone from footage?
Remove the drone from footage. So like the shadows, or I mean, one would be that the VR content aware fill is probably the newest and easiest way to do a lot of stuff like that. I've done a tutorial for Premium Beat. It wasn't removing the drone, but it was removing cars. Like there was like 3 cars driving down a highway, and the drone shot's actually moving. And so like an example of that would be if you're wanting to like create a scene of a car driving down a road, like an establishing shot, and obviously sometimes it's hard you can't really block off traffic, so you might have other vehicles on the road too, but you can mask those cars out, and it'll just, remove them digitally there. It looks really good. But the content aware fill, that new feature is probably my go-to for removing most stuff if it works. But like a drone or a drone shadow, I typically try to avoid the drone shadow when I'm filming. That's kind of one of the things I always try to be mindful of. It's because it's just easy. It saves you a lot of time.
Yes.
If you can, but sometimes you can't. So
let's take a look at that, the breakdown again. And can you tell us like what different skills are you using? Like what would you recommend for someone to learn to be able to work on something like this?
Well, for that specific scene, what I did, was just I used a plugin. Well, I used Element 3D to actually add that into the scene, and I motion tracked the scene. And then, like I said, I used the Insta360 camera. So there's if you're kind of a little bit familiar with the immersive VR tools and Mettle's tools and plugins for 360 video in After Effects. So that's basically that's a combination of those 3 things for that specific video. And along those same lines, I mean, for me right now, what's really interesting, I would say, is Cinema 4D, complete 3D, and their integration with After Effects is really nice. And I know Jonathan Wimbush, he is kind of, a lot of his focuses of his tutorials now are kind of in a lot of topics I'm really interested in, which is like the Unreal kind of game engine rendering. I know they just had a really cool demonstration they just released for their new, I think, Unreal version 5. It looks really awesome. But yeah, those are the areas for me right now that are really interesting.
So obviously it ties into virtual production, which is like a big topic right now. I don't know if you saw even the Travis Scott in Fortnite.
Yep, I did see a little bit about that.
Yeah. I actually watched it. I have a 15-year-old son at home, so that was like a big deal in our house since we're all at home right now. So I hear a lot more of what's going on in the teenager world. But obviously that's all completely done in 3D. But even in cinematic, like there seems to be a merging of capturing cinematic footage or capturing people, their volumes, or kind of putting everything together, like in The Mandalorian.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking of when you're describing that. Yeah, I mean, you can see what they've done for all their backdrops, and I mean, they could film that, in one location, and you can see how many different locations it seems like they're in, which that was mind blowing. It was fun to watch that show and then afterwards see how it was done. And
yes,
and, it was that very revealing. I'm glad they did wait to release that till afterward, because that way you weren't, trying to look forward to think about it. But yeah, that just goes to show you, you've got all those backgrounds. I think another one is like the Quixel Mega Scans, for all the terrain and stuff. So yeah, you can create these virtual worlds, and you can do it all remotely pretty much now when you're working on it. And yeah, so that's a lot of possibilities.
So are you trying to work on any of your own virtual productions, or just learn how can you apply your skill set? For someone like you, how could you get more involved in doing something like that?
Well, I mean, there's a ton of ways, really. I know that, like, just for me personally, and just because I was talking about the mega scan, so like, you can do that with drones. You can take drone imagery and then plug that imagery sequence of images into a program, then that will actually create you kind of a 3D model of that terrain. Then you could use that for, in Cinema 4D, or you could use it in Unreal or any other engine there as a 3D model. So I mean, yeah, for me, there's lots of ways, and then you could also do 2D animation, so you can do kind of your own world that way too. I think After Effects for me has always been what I've been drawn to the most, because it's kind of like this central hub of like being able to do video editing, and it's kind of like a mixture of 3D and Photoshop, and so that I'm really drawn to that. But you can branch out from it, obviously, and really choose your own path, because a lot of people use After Effects. I'm more of a compositor kind of in nature, but I mean, there's 2D animators, and then you have the completely 3D guys. So
yeah, if you have a Creative Cloud subscription, there's a lot of great tutorials. You did a lot of the tutorials for their immersive tools, which were Skybox, which is what we had developed. I think you can rely on those tutorials to be pretty great. You know, that's I think if you want to learn After Effects or Photoshop, like you can start off by just watching their recommended tutorials, which and then no matter what you're doing, it's a lot of projects seem to go through the Creative Cloud software in one way or another. And so if someone is just starting out and wants to do some of what you're doing, like obviously there's a lot of restrictions on drones now, but it works because you're in a more remote area. So someone could still do some shooting in a remote area. What kind of drone do you use? Like what's your preference?
I've got a couple. The kind of main flagship one I have is the Inspire 1, and it's got a X5R, so it's got a little bit more advanced camera on it. It's a RAW camera that I can shoot with, but I mean, that wasn't something I dove into immediately. I definitely worked my way up. And I will say this about drones, for anybody doing like video production, they'll have a big advantage in the sense that if you already are shooting like regular video and like working in After Effects, like that helps me so much because I'm kind of shooting. I know I've talked about this before, shooting for the edit in that regard. But like if you took a guy with a low budget drone, but he shoots a lot of video, knows cinematography, kind of knows angles to look for, understands basic camera settings.
Yes.
They're going to blow anybody out of the water that has a massively expensive drone that doesn't have that experience. I mean, it's night and day difference. Because, I mean, you could say it just starts with the story, because if you're going out to shoot, in your mind, you are already seeing the final edit in some way. So you're shooting to tell the story instead of, trying to match the pieces together, which are obviously very well done in big productions. And if you have After Effects experience or video experience, you can finesse the shots. You can you know how to color grade. You can, because all those shots in the reel that they're definitely finessed for sure. And other people are just like, oh, I just shot it in camera and here it is. It's not going to look as good as if you have the ability to polish it up. So definitely,
we have a couple questions to jump to. So first is from Chris. Hey, Chris. He's asking, out of all the Mettle products, which is your personal favorite?
Oh, well, Skybox is always going to have a place in my heart because that was the original one. I like Freeform a lot and Flux a lot right now. That's kind of the ones I probably use the most. And I like Flux. I like for the atmospheres, tracking that into drone shots and stuff I use. And then Freeform, the True Detective stuff, the displacement, I really enjoyed that quite a bit. And then even as we saw with that recent spear animation reveal, I like it. Gives you the possibility to kind of create a template, and then you can change it up with different images, and it's procedural, I guess, in that case. So that's a lot of fun.
And we have another question from Alexandre. What do you think of all the real-time stuff, like the new Unreal 5 demo?
Yeah, no, it's mind-blowing. That's I think, definitely something to take a look at and look at very seriously. I think it's hard to argue with how good that stuff looks, and being rendered in real time on, like, I think it was a PlayStation 5, they said, which is, mind-blowing, because I figure most serious VFX artists probably have a machine that's going to have more hardware than a PlayStation 5, and they're like, well, I'm not rendering anything like this. So that's, I think that's going to be used a lot more.
Well, especially now we're seeing a lot of speeding up of technology. A lot of things are really coming together, but at the root of it all, it really is storytelling. Something has to tell a good story, and like even in the Travis Scott in Fortnite, I mean, that was not super high resolution, but it just worked altogether. Like it was fun. So it's a great time for artists to experiment, learn new stuff, and in some ways take advantage of the time now of not being able to travel and just learn new stuff. So we're going to put the links for all the sites that you mentioned in the comments and in the description of this live stream. And that's where that just about wraps it up. So I'd like to say thank you very much, Charles, for joining us here today, and thank you for everyone watching. It's been a pleasure to virtually connect, and see you next time.
Yep, thank y'all.